ด้วยน้ำใจไม่แพ้เถื่อนแถวอโยธยาเหลืองแดงแข็งและแผ่นศิลาไม่เคยยอมคอยตาในเชิงทะเลชัยและการเมืองเทิดไทยอันรุ่งเรืองเชิงกีฬาไม่พรั่นใครด้วยใจสูงส่ง
น้อมประเทืองธรรมศาสตร์และการเมืองเทิดไทยอันรุ่งเรืองเชิงกีฬาไม่พรั่นใครด้วยใจสูงส่ง
ยามทุกข์ต้องมันบุกไล่กินเข้าประชิดชีวิตใช้ด้วยน้ำใจไม่แพ้เถื่อนแถวอโยธยา
วัสดีนะคะทุกท่าน Welcome back to our workshop again. Today we have moved on to the fourth topic, right? Writing the discussion section, which is very important for the quality of manuscripts to be submitted. And always we have Neil, our Dr. Neil Bowen to help as a speaker or teachers for the workshops all the time. And today we are very honored to welcome more audience, professors and doctoral students from Thammasat Business School, Professor Arisala. So we are very happy to serve all communities, faculties, and all outsiders again. And now let me invite Dr. Pasapong Sipijan, our faculty dean, to give a welcome speech. Thank you very much, Dr. Pasapong.
So, good afternoon, everyone. So, welcome to the fourth, webinar today. So, I think we should call it webinar or a workshop because it's not. I mean, if you've been with us, for the first, couple of times, you see that it's not just a lecture, but I think Dr. Neil, got us, he always keeps us busy as well, for the whole, afternoon. I think, but first of all, I would like to thank everyone at the research and innovation unit, especially our vice dean, Dr. Sane, and her, very, very active, team for organizing this very, very useful series. I think, everyone who's been with us, have found it very, very helpful from, finding research, the journals and to writing introduction. And I think today, we have come to a very, very important step and a very tricky one as well, because myself as a researcher, or I got my MA student and PhD student as well. I think when it comes to, discussing our result, I think it's very hard sometimes to distinguish between describing, the data we got and discussing it, right? I'm sure there, this part we got stuck sometimes, but I think Dr. Neil today will give us guidance and then, help us improve, this part of our research. So without further ado, we would like, you to join me in welcoming Dr. Neil.
Thank you, Dr. Pasapong. Thank you, Dr. Sane.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neil.
Yeah. Okay, nice to see so many familiar faces.
Yes, right.
And a lot
we
of
have Facebooks as well as a new today.
Okay.
Yes.
Recent people, past and present students as
right.
well. Okay, very good. So today it's episode 4, the discussion section. So I'll share my screen. We'll get down to it because we don't have a lot of time. But it is, as John Pasapong said, it's typically a very difficult part of the paper to write. So if you remember back to the other webinars where we talked about the research papers in general, the general genre of them, we've already done the introduction part and the literature review part. We don't do the methods because the methods is generally very easy to write. It's just a description of what you did in the past tense. And similar with the results, you can kind of just present results, give summaries, give descriptions, give nice graphs, things like that. So we don't really need to focus too much on the how and the what in our papers. But it's moving towards the discussion, towards the conclusion, when we have to answer this important question, so what? Why does anybody care about what you're talking about? And this is what's very difficult when it comes to the discussion. So that's what we're focusing on today, is this discussion section, and also moving into the conclusion a little bit. You notice that this genre is called the IMRD, so it doesn't really have the C on the end. The conclusion is part of the discussion, if you like. So we look at the elements of a discussion and a conclusion today together. So with the discussion part, it's typically the longest part of the paper, usually about 30 to 35%. of your word count. So keep that in mind when you're doing your outline, when you're making your plan for your research paper. You have an idea of what the word limit is for the journal that you're going to submit to. So it could be anything from 7,000 to 12,000 words. Calculate 30 to 35% and then have that number in your head. That's the amount of space you have to build up results and discussion with. Okay. So you need to limit yourself at the beginning, particularly you don't want to go off topic, off focus with that. As Ajahn Pasapong said, most people find it the hardest section to write, okay? This is because it calls for very high level thinking. So you have to really know your subject matter inside out. And then you also have to be able to present it in a very complex fashion, if you like. Okay, so if you're writing in a second language, it's doubly hard for you, because not only do you have to do this high level critical thinking, but then you have to also translate those thoughts into another language, which is quite difficult for us to do. So the first major part of today's webinar, what I want you to realize that it's called a discussion, okay, but it's more a collection of mini arguments. So that's what you need to keep in your mind. So a lot of people, they see the discussion, they present their results, and then they start to go into a descriptive mode of writing. They just start describing this result, that result. But it's not a discussion, it's a mini argument. Okay, so you're building up a series of mini arguments that are contributing to answering your research questions. And each of these mini arguments or discussion points that I'm going to be calling them today, they have to contribute to answering your research question. So remember, when you set out to do your paper, your main aim is to answer your research question. If you don't do that, then you failed, basically. That's all you have to do. You set out some good research questions, you give the background and the problem for them, and then you answer them, okay? So that's what your discussion points are doing. They're answering the research questions for you. So all of these little mini arguments, they have to tie back into your research question in some way. So always keep that research question in mind. Everything you do, every paragraph you write, ask yourself, how is this paragraph helping me to answer my research question? If it's not helping you, maybe you don't need it. Maybe you're just wasting words. Okay. So the way I've sequenced this today, I thought that might be useful for some people, is if we frame it in terms of common problems. So rather than just go through a kind of lesson on how to write a discussion section, we can focus on the more common problems that people see, particularly when I see papers that are submitted for reviews, or I review other people's papers. This is the problems I see a lot of, okay? And if you watched Richard's talk on TAL, he focused on the studies, the background to this, showing that, you know, these problems are actually found when people look at the research into studies done by people. So the first one we look at today, it's a poorly formulated research question, or sometimes a lack of a research question, okay? So it may seem quite surprising to you, but there's a lot of papers out there that don't have a research question, or they don't have a hypothesis that they're testing. So then there's no real purpose to them, okay? It doesn't have that central theme, that element that it's trying to address. The second aspect, this is what most of the talk will focus on today. It's poorly formulated discussion points, or your mini arguments, if you like, both at the level of the paragraph and at the level of the section as a whole. Okay, so we look at those today, how we can build up these mini arguments. The third one is a lack of overall cohesion and organization. Okay, so how are these paragraphs that you're writing in your discussion section, how are they cohesively tied to the rest of the paper? A very common error, if you like, is that that doesn't make any reference back to the literature review. Okay, so you're building up a discussion, but you're not drawing on any of the literature that you have in your literature review. So you have to ask yourself then, have I actually used the correct papers in my literature review? Because they don't seem to be informing my discussion. And in terms of the organization, the easiest way to organize it is according to your research questions. So if you have a 2 or a 3-part research question, then you'd have 2 or 3 discussion sections. Try to balance them out in terms of overall length. So you're giving the same priority to each part of your research question. And it's not misbalanced. It's not overloaded to one part of your research question. So you're balancing the sections out. And then we're moving towards the conclusion here, really, when we're talking about these kinds of things. So to get into these top level journals, you have to be very clear about what your contributions are, what the implications are. So the implications answer the so what questions, the limitations of your paper. Okay, I get so many papers. I'm asked to review a lot of papers and they don't have any limitations at the end. And you're left thinking, why do you think your paper is perfect? Every paper has limitations. You have to be open about what your limitations are. But we can soften those in certain ways. And we look at that later on. And then the last part is the future research suggestions. So this tends to get tagged on the very end of a paper. And most people will just give it 1 or 2 sentences. And then they'll just say things like, this can be done with a bigger sample size, or this can be done in a different context. Those are not really helpful suggestions, okay? You think of a lot of researchers, they'll read a paper, they'll jump straight to the end of the paper because they're looking for ideas. What can their next project be? So use that space, use the last few sentences in your paper to make some really strong suggestions for future research that other researchers will actually be interested in doing, okay? So put some thought into it. Don't leave it until the very end and just put down some simple suggestions. Make some good, unique and original suggestions. Okay, so we're going to move on to the first common problem now. This is a very simple one to fix. It's simply bad or missing research questions, okay? We need a good research question because it helps to anchor our discussion in place. So if you think about a bad research question or a poorly formulated one, there's nothing there that holds your discussion points or these mini arguments together, okay? So if you look at the image here of these boats, each of these boats is a discussion point, and this discussion is just drifting all over the place because it has no common research question to attach itself to be the central focal point of your paper. If you have a very good research question with well-formulated parts, it can help you to tie all of your discussion points together, okay? So it helps you with the macro level organization in terms of the sections, and it gives you a central thread or a point of focus that you can keep coming back to. So you can look at the paragraph and think, how is this paragraph tied to this part of my research question? If it's not, maybe get rid of it. Maybe it belongs in a different section. Maybe it's not a discussion point. So you have to have a very good research question or set of research questions to start. Bad research questions, as we all know, they are trivia questions, okay? Ones that don't really take a lot of thought to answer. Ones that we can answer with a quick yes or no. Ones that we can answer just by doing a 5-minute search on Google, okay? So this is what I tell all my undergrad students. They come up with questions that look good, but you can answer them just by going on Google and looking for 5 minutes, okay? You don't want a research question that asks for an opinion that cannot be supported by evidence, okay? This is the big one, number 5. This is the one I see a lot of, okay, when I'm reviewing papers. are research questions that have too many variables or too many constructs inside them. It's usually reflected in the title of the paper. You've probably seen these papers that have giant titles, okay? They have a title that's 20 words long. That usually gives me a warning sign that the research question is probably poorly formulated. There's probably too many variables going on. They're probably trying to look at too much stuff. They're not controlling for things. So think about the title of your paper. If it's too complicated, if it's too wordy, that may reflect that you have a bad research question. So you may need to go back and fix that, okay? Okay, the second issue, this is the main one for today. It's the poorly formulated discussion points, or these mini arguments, as I like to call them, okay? So remember, when you're doing the introduction, you're giving the background, you're giving the gaps, establishing the niche, all this kind of thing. Then you're surveying the literature to help you problematize what it is that you're trying to research. Then the methods is what you did. Now you're switching into a higher level rhetorical structure. Now you're switching into argumentative writing, okay? So this is, it really does draw upon your language proficiency quite a lot, because not only are we dealing with organizational patterns that are not linear, okay, because you're not, if you think about a description or a narrative, you're either moving through time or you're moving through space. With an argument, you're moving between particulate structures, if you like, that are dotted all over the place. And then you're incorporating into that aspects of modality, so modal verbs, comment adjuncts, mood adjuncts, things like that. So it's really drawing on all of your language ability. So poorly formulated arguments, what do I mean by this? Okay, a number of elements that we can go through, make sure that we're ticking each one off when we're writing our discussion. The first one, this is very, very common, where the author chooses the wrong model of argument. Okay, so they are structuring their discussion point around a well-established argument or rhetorical structuring, but it's the wrong type of argument for the audience. Okay, so remember, you have to be very aware of who your audience are. Okay, how are they going to react to your writing, to what you are saying? Okay, so we need to show audience awareness by choosing the correct model of argument. The second one, this is kind of tied in to the first one, where the author doesn't know the basic components of an argument, okay? So everybody, generally speaking, everyone is taught some kind of model of argument, okay? One of the most common ones at the lower levels is the CRE, claims, reasons, evidence, okay? That's okay for simple high school level essays. But when you get up into the upper echelons of research, you have to move away. You have to get a more complicated model of argument for that. So this moves us on to the actual elements of the argument itself. This is quite a large one. I see this all the time with my students, okay, at all levels, where they make a claim based on the evidence they have, but they haven't linked the evidence to the claim. There's not enough warrant, okay, sufficient warrant. So warrant is the term we use for logical statements, arguments by generalization, arguments by analogy, arguments by sign, things like that we can use to link our results to the claims that we're making. So we see a lot of writers, they go straight from the result to the claim. You probably know the connections in your mind, okay? You know how you've come to this claim, but there's a number of steps missing, and the reader may not be able to follow the logic of how you've gone from point A to point B. So particularly important in writing because they cannot ask you, what do you mean? They can't ask for clarification, okay? And indeed, if you look at Anyone who's had a paper reviewed, you know that most of the comments that you get from the reviewers, from the peer review, most of them refer to the clarity of your argument. They ask for more warrant, they ask for more backing, okay? So try to cut out those comments from the reviewers by giving them enough links between your evidence and your claim. Sometimes we have enough warrant, so we have sufficient warrant that's linking the grounds, the results to our claim, but we can lack sufficient backing. Okay, so backing are statements that support the warrant. So this is a good opportunity in your discussion section to working links to existing literature. Okay, this is another common problem we see where we have a discussion section, but there's no references to outside work. You're not connecting what you're found, what you're interpreting to the wider field. Okay, so use this opportunity wherever you can support your warrants with some kind of backing. There's normally always some kind of outside study that you can reference, okay, to give you additional backing for your warrants. And we may have enough warrants and enough backing to link the grounds to the claim, but then they don't consider any rebuttals, okay, so any alternative explanations, any counterclaims, counter arguments. So they've just gone with one line of thought. Okay, as you know, if you're building up an argument, you have to consider alternative interpretations, particularly at the higher level of publication, because other people will have these counterclaims. So you want to address them early on. You want to say, oh, I've considered this alternative interpretation, and it's not as good as my interpretation because A, B, C. Okay, so you're cutting out any counterclaims to what you're claiming yourself. So those are the elements we'll be focusing on in the next few slides: the grounds, the claim, the warrant, the backing, and rebuttals. So let's go back to point A first, where the author chooses the wrong model of argument. So they're showing a lack of audience awareness. Oh, sorry, I missed out the qualified. Come back to that. Okay, so in terms of models of argument, you've probably seen these three before, but we'll go through them just so that everybody's familiarized and can remember them. The first one that you typically taught in high school is the classical type of argument, okay? Argument of rhetoric, or the Aristotelian argument. So this is made up of 5 elements, okay? If you know your classic Greek argument, we have things like exordium, kairos, narratio, propositio, these kinds of things, okay? This type of argument, it's useful when your audience already knows you, or they respect you, or you have some kind of standing or higher position than them, okay? And so because of that, it's not a very useful type of argument when you're writing a scientific paper, okay? Because your audience are other academics. They probably don't know you personally, okay? They may have read other work that you've done, but they see themselves as being at an equal level than you, typically speaking. So you don't have any standing over them. You don't have authority as such. If you are a very well-known person in the field, then perhaps you can switch to this model of argument and use it to write a paper. But for most of us, we're not going to get away with this, okay? Because our audience is just going to go, no, stop, I'm not listening to you anymore. The second type is the Rogerian argument, okay? This takes a more balanced view. So it's very useful type of argument when the audience has power over you, okay? Or perhaps they don't relate to you or your views. It's also very useful when you're arguing a very sensitive topic, okay? So topics that tend to draw people's emotions out, okay? So anything that ends in ism, really. So when you're trying to argue these kinds of things, it's very difficult to convince everybody of your point of view. There's always going to be some people on the other side of it because they're emotionally invested. So again, this is not very appropriate if you're trying to write an IMRD paper, okay? Because you want to present an argument that actually has a winning side as such. You want your claim to be put forth as the strongest claim. You don't want to necessarily balance lots of different claims, because then your paper it might not be contributing anything to moving an argument forward, moving the field forward. So the other popular one is the Toulmin Method by the British philosopher Stephen Toulmin. This is useful when your audience is very logical and rational, and when we're dealing with objective facts as the basis for our argument, okay? So this is the method or the model of argument that's most closely tied to scientific inquiry, okay? Because we know when we're doing scientific experiments, when you're following the scientific method, it's the data that drives everything else, okay? So the Toulmin method is based on the data comes first. Everything branches off the data. So if you're following this type of method, you're using your results to generate your argument, and this will appeal to an audience that's very logical. It will appeal to an audience that sees the results as the most important part of your argument. Okay. So this is the one that we really need to follow most of the time when we're writing a discussion section for an IMRD paper. So the basic components of this argument, these are the ones that you need to keep in your mind when you're writing your discussion points. It's quite an easy model. There's 6 elements, okay? Everything starts with the data, with the results. So we look at our results, we look at our data, we look for patterns, and then this becomes the evidence, the facts, the statistics, and so on, that we can make claims about. Okay, so we always start, we write the results section first, we present nice graphs, we give some statistics if we have a big enough sample size, and now we have the grounds to build an argument from, the grounds to build a discussion from. So we look at our results, we see if there's any patterns there, we see if there are any key findings or significant findings, and then we can make some kind of claim. We can maybe generate a claim, okay? So the claim is just a statement that you're arguing for the thesis. So the evidence, the result leads straight to our claim. But sometimes it may not be obvious to your reader how you've gone from your results to your claim. Okay, so you've gone in a straight line, but the reader may not have the same knowledge base as you. So they don't know how you've gone from the results to the claim. So you have to provide some kind of warrant that links the result to the claim. So these are general, hypothetical, logical statements, okay? Sometimes they can be implicit. So if it's a common sense link between the result and the claim, maybe you don't need to give a warrant, okay? Because it's obvious. Just by looking at the results, you can make this claim. But more often than not, when you're writing a discussion for an IMRD paper, you have to provide additional warrant. You have to show the reader how you've gone from your results to the claim that you're making, okay? So we're connecting the claim to the data, basically. That's all you're doing. But sometimes the warrant that you provide is not enough on its own, okay? So you have to give additional backing. So this is statements that support your warrants. So they could be smaller arguments. They don't prove the central claim you're making. They only prove the warrant. Okay, so this is the opportunity for you to bring in outside sources, to start referencing other studies. Maybe other studies have found similar results to you and made similar claims. So that will support your warrant. Okay, once we've set up a nice little claim, we've linked the claim to the results through sufficient warrant and backing. Then we consider, do I need to qualify this claim? Do I need to put any limits on it? Okay. Very often I see claims that are too strong. Okay, they've made a claim and they're presenting it as if it's 100% that thing in every instance, every time. Okay, we know nothing is ever 100% true. So we have to limit it in some respect, okay, because there may be different contexts where our claim doesn't apply. There may be other interpretations that are equally valid. So we have to qualify it, soften it a little bit. So we can use hedges, we can put markers of epistemic stance on there. So words like probably, very likely, almost certainly, in all likelihood, these kinds of softening phrases and words, okay, that distance our claim from being 100% true, makes it more difficult to argue against. And we also need to consider any rebuttals, the opposing argument to your claim. So alternative interpretations, okay? So again, we need to consider alternative interpretations because sometimes when we go down that road, when we start looking at possible counter arguments, the counter argument may be stronger than the initial argument we set out. So we have to change our point of view, okay? So we need to explore all of the types of interpretations because sometimes it can lead to a stronger claim being made. So let's look at this as an example, and then it's much easier for us to understand how it actually works in practice. So we start with the results. We can start with some observable data, if you like. We see some smoke, it's coming out of Knox's bedroom. So there's our grounds to make a claim. Okay, there's our evidence, there's our results. So we look at this evidence and we say, okay, there's some smoke, it's coming out of Knox's bedroom. I can claim, okay, Knox's bedroom is on fire. Seems like a logical claim because we know from our shared experience that smoke can be linked to fire and there's smoke coming out of the bedroom. So Knox's bedroom is on fire. You made a claim, okay? But think about it in terms of if you're writing an IMRD paper, it might not be as simple as this, okay? The reader might not see how you've gone from the grounds to the claim. So you need to provide some additional warrant to link those two. So we can tell them, hey, smoke is a primary sign of fire. That's why I'm making this claim based on this evidence. So you've given a little bit of warrant there, okay? Maybe they're not happy, they still don't get it, okay? They still don't see how you've made this claim. So we give a little bit of backing. We say, okay, because fires generally produce smoke, okay, that's why they're a primary sign of fire. So now we've linked the grounds, the data to the claim through a basic warrant and a little bit of backing. Okay, so we've kind of filled in all the gaps. Assume that your reader is completely clueless. They don't know what smoke is. They've never seen a fire. So you've given them all the information that they need to be able to make a judgment on whether your claim is valid or not. But we still have two elements left here. So let's consider any alternative interpretations. Are there any possible rebuttals to my claim? Okay, someone might say smoke is a product of a chemical reaction. You don't need to have fire. You can mix two liquids together and they will give off smoke. Okay, so okay, that's a valid rebuttal. So because of that, we have to qualify our claim. So in all likelihood, Knox's bedroom is on fire. Okay, so we have the 6 elements. You see how you started with the grounds, with the data. Okay, so we start with the grounds, the data. We can make a claim based on our general common sense knowledge. Think about the reader. Do they need additional information to link this data to my claim? Okay, let's assume they're stupid. They don't know. Let's tell them that smoke is a primary sign of fire. They're still stupid, so let's give them a little bit more information because fires generally produce smoke. We've considered a basic rebuttal and we qualified our claim. Okay, so we have a nice little discussion point here based on one set of results. We can turn this into a simple paragraph. Results show that smoke is coming from Knox's bedroom. Therefore, because smoke is a primary sign of fire, and fires generally produce smoke, in all likelihood, Knox's bedroom is on fire, unless, of course, the smoke is a product of a chemical reaction. So it's a very simple, short discussion point, but it has all the elements in there to make it a strong mini argument, okay? Obviously, it's a generalization, it's a simple example, but we can extrapolate that upwards to more complicated ones, as we'll see next when we go through the issues with this. Okay, so one of the very common problems we see is that people don't provide enough warrant. Okay, so they don't provide that link between the results and their claim that they are making. So here's a little extract of results. Results show that on average, 68% of image participants in these ELT textbooks are white. So there's a bit of results, an observation that we've made. From a publisher's viewpoint, this is an accurate representation. So we've gone straight from our result to a claim, okay? But there's no warrant there. There's nothing that links our result to our claim. So the reader's left thinking, hold on, what's going on? You've jumped from A to D. Where is B and C? You need to tell me B and C, what's in between. So there's no explicit link between your results and the claim. So there's no warrant. So the reader's left asking, on what basis have you made this claim? Okay, where's the link between these grounds and this claim? So we can fill that in for them. We can give them a little bit of warrant, what's been hidden in your head up until now. We can say, since most textbooks are published in the US or UK, so from a publisher's viewpoint, this is an accurate representation. But again, okay, you've built it up a little bit, but the reader's still left questioning, how does this warrant link this grounds to your claim? There's still something missing, okay? So we need to provide some additional backing in here. So we can give a little bit of backing in red, and whites comprise 61% of the US population and 86% of the UK population. From a publisher's viewpoint, this is an accurate representation. So now your reader gets it. Now they understand how you've gone from those results to that claim. You filled in the missing pieces for them, okay? So you've explicitly linked the grounds to your claim through sufficient warrant and backing. But now we also have to consider alternative interpretations of this. So what about possible rebuttals or counterclaims? Okay, so let's think about this. Okay, so if racial representation does bring benefit, discussion point there, and we finished with a new claim. So the new claim is actually, the new claim is stronger than our original claim. So maybe we want to change our minds. Maybe we want to switch to a different point of view now. So look at the initial claim we made. Does it need to be qualified? Yes, because the rebuttal is a valid rebuttal. So we need to work in some kind of qualification. Okay, I have a lot of chats. What's going on? Okay. Okay, so let's look at qualification. We can work qualification into this. So now we have a final discussion point based on this key finding. So we've built up a mini argument in a very short paragraph. Okay, we started with the results. Results show that something. Then we have some warrant. Then we have some backing to support that warrant. And then we've made a claim, okay? In pink, we've had to qualify the claim. So we say some publishers may be inaccurate. Okay, so we've distanced ourselves from how true that claim is. Then we have another little mini argument, a rebuttal, where we have some warrant and some backing. And then we have a second claim. In this instance, the second claim looks to be better than our first claim, so we're probably going to change our mind. Okay, so just by considering all the elements of the argument, we've changed our point of view. Okay, so basically, when you're building a discussion point, you want to KISS it. Okay, KISS stands for keep it simple, stupid. You just look at your results. That's where you start. Okay, you have your graphs, you have your statistics, your numbers, you have any patterns that you identified. Always good to present it visually because it saves your word count and it makes it easier for the reader to see visually what you're trying to tell them. Make a reasonable claim based on your interpretation of the data, okay? And then link that claim to the data through logical warrants if it needs to be logically linked to it. You can use your intellect and common sense and then think about, do I need additional backing for these warrants, okay? This is where it's a good opportunity for you to work in other published research and other published findings if you need to. So you can start linking your claims to other studies through the backing that you're providing for your warrants. Then you consider any counterclaims, draft a quick rebuttal to them again. Again, you can use published research to back any warrants, and then go back and qualify any claims that you need to qualify, okay? And the amount of qualification you're doing depends on how strong you want that claim to be, okay? So those are the basic elements. We have the 6 elements. You start with the data, you make a claim, then you decide, do I need to link the claim to the data through warrants? Do I need to give backing for my warrants? Are there any alternative interpretations or rebuttals that I need to include? And now do I need to qualify these claims that I'm making? Okay, so keep these 6 elements in mind anytime you're writing a discussion point. Okay, so now it's your turn. We're going to have a breakout room task. There's a Microsoft Word document. I think it's been emailed to you. Okay, I think it's about 6 pages long. We're doing task 1. It's going to be about 20 minutes in your breakout rooms. I've given you an overall claim. Okay, there's a short paragraph that's an overall claim, and I've given you the results that claim is based upon. Okay, what I'd like you to do in the breakout rooms is to formulate some mini claims based on the grounds, on the results that I've given you. There's a couple of graphs and there's a couple of data tables. I want you to use these mini claims to support your overall claim. Okay, so you're building up some discussion points. Support your mini claims with warrants and backing if you need to, and also qualify them where appropriate. And if you have time, I realize 20 minutes is not a lot of time. If you have time, we can consider any rebuttals, so any alternative interpretations. But mainly what I'd like you to do is to come up with some mini arguments that support the overall claim. Okay. So 20 minutes. Okay. So I realize that it is a very difficult exercise because you're not familiar with the results. You know, if you're doing the paper yourself, then you will have spent days and weeks looking at that data, making those graphs. You'll understand it. So it's easier for you to interpret it. But what I want to do with the purpose of this exercise is just to illustrate the kind of level of detail that you have to go into every time you make a claim. Because what you see is people go straight from the evidence to a claim, and then they move on to another claim, and then another claim. And they're not backing it up with any kind of warrants or any kinds of backing or anything like that. So we can go through what I wrote down, okay? So the overall claim was that the number of white people in the pictures in these listening and speaking books, it's very high, 67% across all 5 books. And I said that that's a problem for a number of reasons, okay? So this was my claim. I give the result and then I make a claim. Now I have to say, why is it a contentious issue? Why is it a problem? Okay, so then I would expect to see a couple of paragraphs, small paragraphs going through each reason. So the first one, I get some evidence. The number of Chinese people learning English as a foreign language, to say nothing of the millions in other East Asian countries, is estimated at around 400 million. This accounts for 1/3 of all English language learners worldwide. Then I give some figures for Indonesia. Then I make a claim. Despite this, we saw very little evidence of any Southeast Asians in our sample. Then we have a little warrant to back that claim. The majority of the 128 East Asian participants were lighter skinned. And if one had to guess as to their origin, they represented mainly Chinese, Japanese, and Korean populations. Then some backing for that warrant. Even then, the majority of these image participants were found in small images and represented a mere 9%. Now I can make a claim, hence, with regard to population demographics, there's a qualifier there, okay? East Asians are profoundly underrepresented in these textbooks, and Southeast Asians are essentially invisible, okay? So there's one small mini argument that gives one reason why the number of whites is a problem, because most of the people learning English are not white, okay? And a lot of Southeast Asian people are learning English, but they're not included in these books, but they're the people they're selling the books to. Mini argument 2, again, start with some evidence, some results. The numerical presence of others was the second lowest, yet this includes Hispanics, Minas, etc. There's some backing there in the form of references to population statistics. Then I go on to present some more evidence. Moreover, the representation in large images was very low. Now I make a claim. When we examine the depiction of others, there is a general tendency for them to be presented in isolation. Some warrants, some backing, another claim, some more warrant, and then a claim at the very end. They are clearly underrepresented in terms of numerical and physical presence. Okay, so you see how detailed it is. You haven't just gone from the ground to the claim, you filled in the gaps between. So it's very clear to the reader why you're making this claim and where the claim has come from. Okay, it would be very difficult for them to break it down and argue against it. And then there's one more argument at the end relating to the results about the black image participants. Okay, so again, some grounds, a claim, and a warrant. So those were the 3 discussion points that I generated based on my overall claim. Okay, so the overall claim was, it's an obviously contentious issue for a number of reasons, and here are my reasons: 1, 2, 3. Okay, so just 3 short paragraphs, 3 short discussion points. Okay, so let's move on to a different topic now, move away from the argument a little bit, and look at overall cohesion and organization when we're writing the discussion section. We can go straight back into a breakout room now, because I'd like you to think about it, talk about it. Discuss how when you're writing an article, when you're writing your thesis or any type of discussion or longer paper, if you like, how you create and maintain cohesion, okay? Think about the strategies and techniques that you found useful. Also talk about the difference between qualitative, quantitative, and mixed method research, because there's a slightly different discussion and result presentations. And in your groups, make a list, a quick list of 10 suggestions, strategies, techniques that you think are useful, that you like to use. So just 10 minutes for this very quickly. Hopefully I can get to each room. Okay, so I listened to a couple of rooms. I made it to a few rooms this time. A lot of good suggestions. The main thing to focus on at this level is it's more the macro level stuff, the bigger level stuff. We can all write paragraphs. We can all write topic sentences. We know the connectors. We know the transitions between sentences. That's not the issue. It's the larger cohesive unit that you need to focus on. Okay, so anytime you write that paragraph, look at your research question and say, how is this paragraph connected to my research question? If it's not, maybe delete it. And look at the length of the paragraph. Sometimes you have very long paragraphs and then very short paragraphs. You're telling the reader that this long paragraph is more important than the short one. Is that what you're trying to do with it? Or have you just waffled on a little bit too much in that longer paragraph? Okay, so I'm just going to go through some very quick basic ones. So when we're looking at presenting the results, first of all, typically it's the quantitative ones that would come first, where you talk about the most meaningful, the most significant, or the ones that you didn't expect to see. Because we often get a lot of results that we kind of expect to get them. They're not surprising. So we can drift across those. Okay. So I had a question in one of the breakout rooms about the language form. Okay. So think about the tense shift that you're doing. When I'm writing, the method will be in past tense, okay, because it's finished. So simple past tense in the active voice, okay, so it's either I did this or we did this. So keep it in the active. When I switch to the results and discussions, I tend to switch into the present tense, okay, because the results show something. They didn't show it in the past tense. They show it right now as I'm writing about it, and they show it as I'm discussing it. Okay, so the results and the discussion tend to be in the present tense, and keep it active voice as much as possible. So once you've presented the quantitative results, you could present qualitative results if you're doing a mixed method. Okay, with the qualitative, we're discussing extracts, examples, presenting themes or patterns, whatever we find interesting. This is a big one, the fourth bullet point, okay? If you don't talk about a set of results, why are you putting them in your paper? Okay, this really gets my eyes rolling when I read it in a review paper, where someone has presented a massive table, or they've presented a very long extract, but then they only talk about 2 or 3 of the data points. Why are you giving me all this data? I don't need it. I only need what you're talking about. Put the rest in an appendix, okay? So unless you're actually talking about it or making use of it, why bother presenting it? Okay, I know you're excited to present it because you've done all this analysis, but only give the reader what's useful. So make the tables as small as possible. Make your extracts small. If you're talking about line 1 to line 10, maybe cut out the lines in the middle. Just have ellipses, ... unless it's important to the discussion point that you're doing. Okay, thank you. Okay. So in terms of cohesion, we need to make sure that each discussion point is linked to your research question. It's obvious to the reader why you're discussing it, because it's contributing to answering your research question. It's good if you paraphrase your research questions and use them as section headings. Okay, so keep the section heading very short, 6 to 7 words, and do it in terms of the parts of your research question. So the reader can see that this section is answering this part of your research question. This section is answering another part of the research question. This is one of the main things that I do is I give each section a word limit and then I stick to that word limit. Okay, so I put that word limit next to the section heading. So say 400 words, that section is going to be 400 words. I'm not going over 400 words. Okay, that's one way that you can balance your sections and to give enough importance to every part of your discussion. So you're not balanced, if you like. You're not discussing part A of your research question with 1,000 words, and then part B is only 200 words. Why is only 200 words? Is that part of your research question even worth discussing? So give each section a word limit and stick to those word limits, okay? And then that will help you with the overall unity of it as well. Another thing I like to do is I just look at the page, and you can visually see if you have a very short paragraph, only 3 or 4 lines long, or if you have a very long paragraph, which is say 10 or 12 lines long. And I ask myself, why is this short? Why is this long? If it's long, I'll try to cut it down because I've probably waffled on a little bit. If it's short, maybe I haven't said enough about that discussion point, or maybe it's not an important discussion point. So I like to balance out my paragraphs, okay? So I don't have really short ones, I don't have really long ones. Another big one is to link your discussion points to the topics in your literature review. Okay, so you've already covered a lot of studies, a lot of findings. Make use of them again in your discussion. Otherwise, why are they in your literature review? They're not going to be that relevant. Okay, so if you've covered studies that have done the similar thing to you and they have different results or they have similar results, put those in your discussion so you're comparing and contrasting to other studies. Okay. And give an overall summary statement for each section. So at the end of each section of your discussion, just a very brief, very short paragraph, 6 or 7 lines, telling the reader exactly what you just claimed in that section, okay, and why you claimed it very briefly before you move on to the next section. Okay, so this is the most difficult part, as far as I'm concerned, is telling the reader what your contributions are, what the implications are, limitations, and future research. Okay, limitations and future research is quite easy. It's the implications that are very difficult. These are the ones that you really have to sit down and think about. Often you have to walk away from your paper, forget about it, and then they come to you in the middle of the night in a dream mostly. Okay, so these implications are very difficult to nail down, to pin down. So in terms of contributions, go back and look at your introduction, the part that you've already written, okay? Look at move 2 of your introduction, which we covered in the last episode. Have you made the contributions you said you would? Okay, so you already outlined your contributions that you were hoping to make in your introduction. Have you actually done that? So have a look in terms of, have you filled a gap? So typically you should have filled a gap. So you'll have some empirical findings, okay? But maybe you've come up with a new method, a new measure, a new coding scheme that's resulted from your paper. So put that forward as a contribution, something that you're contributing to the field. Have you provided a solution to something? So have you fixed the problem with a method, a theory, a framework, or maybe previous findings? So again, explicitly outline that in your contribution, in the conclusion. Say that we have contributed A, B, C. Have you clarified something? Have you made something clear that was unclear before? Or have you added something? Okay, it's very easy to add something. So this should always be a contribution that you're listing. Are you continuing a tradition? So are you moving a field forward? Are you answering a call for more work in your particular area? This is generally a very easy one to make. So for example, in another paper you read, did somebody say we need more research in area A? And now you've done that research, you can say, we've contributed to the call for, and then put in a citation to that call, okay? So you're saying that these researchers called for more research. I'm giving it to you. Here it is. This is one of my contributions, okay? So list your contributions at the end when you come to the conclusions. Implications. This is the most difficult one for anybody, I think. You're going beyond the interpretations and you're suggesting real world implications. So you're giving the answer to the so what questions. Okay, so you're looking at your interpretations, your claims, and you're asking yourself, so what? Who would care about this interpretation and why? Why does it even matter? Okay, so it's a good idea if you formulate specific so what questions. So things like, what does this interpretation mean in light of the paper's aims? What is significant about this interpretation? How does this interpretation enrich our understanding of why? Okay, this is a particularly useful question because you can swap out why for innovations in theory, method, or pedagogical practices. Okay, so how does your interpretation or your claim move the real world forward? What can we learn from it and put into actual practice, put into use in everyday life? How can somebody make use of your findings? Okay, so this is the last breakout room of today. It's quite a long 20 minutes, okay? This is going to be very difficult. I'm expecting it to be difficult. So you have some more results from the same paper that you've already been looking at, the representation of race. Consider the overall aim or the goal of this paper. I've given you the research questions in the Word document. Discuss what the findings mean, okay, in the extract I've given you, in terms of real world implications. So what are the implications of these findings, my interpretation of these findings for textbook production, so English language teaching textbook production, and or consumption with regard to race, okay? So we've already established that there's too many white people in pictures. You've made some claims saying that there should be more East Asians, there should be more blacks. But now you have this finding, okay, which is a kind of an interesting finding in itself. What does this actually mean if you're going to go to the textbook producers and say, look, put more black people in your images, put more East Asians, put more images that show direct contact with the student, put more images in that show black people in positions of power in the picture, okay? So think about, can you actually make these suggestions or not in light of these findings? Okay. Okay, I have some answers for the implications. I'll post these up later on. I'll give them to Ajahn Sane and she can post them on the Laren thing. Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'll skip forward to the limitations. So when you're thinking about your limitations, just basically put on your reviewing hat, pretend that you're reviewing your own paper, ask the general questions you would ask if you were reviewing a paper, such as, is your sample large or broad enough to make generalizations to other contexts? Does your framework have any known weaknesses that you need to comment on? Were your measures valid and reliable enough, or could you improve upon them in some way? Could you look at your research problem from an equally valid viewpoint? And so on. The general stuff you would ask of anybody else's paper, make sure you ask it of your own paper, okay? So make a comprehensive list of limitations, put some thought into it. It shows any reviewer that you recognize the limitations in your own work. But try to lower the impact of the limitations that you state by giving simple rebuttals to each one. So at the very end, in the last conclusion paragraph, you'd have something like this. Okay, so the limitations are in black This is for the paper you've been doing the exercises on. So the first limitation, we only examine textbooks produced by major Western publishers. But then you can have a little caveat, a little argument there. However, we believe such an approach gives valuable insights into a single context of production. So you've softened that limitation there by giving a rebuttal. Second, we did not include supplemental material, workbooks, teachers' editions, or online material. Then you give a little rebuttal. Future studies may want to expand into these areas. And then there's just more limitations and more rebuttals to each limitation. So think about your limitation paragraph at the end. You want a paragraph for your limitations. You don't want 1 or 2 sentences. It has to be more comprehensive than that. But try to give softening statements. So you give your limitation and then you say, however, so you soften it, okay? And then at the very end, you give a short paragraph for future suggestions. If you've considered the implications and the limitations in detail, suggesting future research is very easy because you've already, you know all the limitations. You can suggest research that will overcome the limitations. You can suggest research that will build upon the implications, okay? But don't give statements like these. Future studies could use larger samples or consider different contexts. Okay, that's not really much of a suggestion, okay? Give a specific suggestion that somebody else can pick up and actually do, okay? It'll be interesting to someone else. So they're not just doing a replication of your study with a larger sample or in a different context. They are doing a unique twist on what you've been doing, okay? So they can get their paper into a good journal. Okay, so that's that for today. Finish on time, we have to go quite quick. Okay, so I'll give the floor back to Sane so we can wrap up. Any questions before we finish? Sorry.
Any question? Maybe
I
no.
have a question.
Okay. Ajahn Koi, go ahead,ค่ะ.
I noticed that some research papers, sometimes they have a separate section for limitations, sometimes they don't. So Ajahn Neil, could you give us some advice of when we should have the separate paragraph for limitations, or when it should be like part of the discussion section?
Yeah, so basically what I do before I submit my paper, I'll look at the ones that they've recently published and see how they've been laid out. So if they have these extra section headings, then I have to work them into my own paper. So some journals are quite strange. Some journals let you put results and discussion together, for example. Some don't let you do that. You have to have results and then discussion separately. So look at the journal that you're submitting to and look at the papers that they've published and look at the section headers that they've used. And then you just have to tailor your paper to match.
So I guess the answer is it depends.
It depends on the journal and the journal editor, what they like to see. Yeah.
Okay.
So always check before you submit. Yeah.
Thank you.
Check as well. It's always good to look at the section headings they use, because some journals don't like you to use things like literature review. They want to have a descriptive heading. And others don't like to have the conclusion separate. They just go straight from discussion to finish. They don't have a separate conclusion section. So just look at the journal where you're going to submit and see what they've done.
I observe another types, Ajahn Neil. Writers put limitations for all limitations. They did not make limitations delimitation, right? So they didn't have rebuttal. So it's like they are weakening their point, right?
Yes, weakening their point.
Right.
It's like, it's almost as if it's an afterthought.
Right.
They didn't think of any limitations before they started. You should always have an idea of what your limitations are when you're coming up with your research design. and then try to find ways around them. If you can't find ways around them, you can find ways to justify
Yes.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Okay, I like it. We need to justify, right, our
Yes.
limitations.
Particularly when you're selecting your sample, that's the biggest justification.
Right.
Why is this your sample? Why are you only looking at this? Can you justify that? For the paper, for the breakout room tasks, I had to really justify why I picked those 5 books, so they weren't random. Yeah. So you justify why you picked each one.
All right. So sometimes we might suggest for more samples, but it should not end for the limitation itself, right? We need to do something better, right?
Yeah, end on a very strong point. End on something useful for somebody. Otherwise, the paper just kind of fizzles out. Yeah.
Right.
And the reader's just left thinking, you know.
Classic one.
Yeah, classic one. Give them something to think about when they leave.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Cool. Yeah, I observe your technique, right? We make limitations, the limitation in terms of not try to weaken our own work.
No, I learned that from Heathrow's when I worked with him on the paper. That's what he did. So I thought that's a good idea.
Yes, right. So okay, so I'm not sure if we have any more questions from the audience, or if you have some question, we still meet with Ajahn Neil, Dr. Neil Bowen next month, right? For the last one. Ajahn Alisa, Ajahn Alisa, yeah, Ajahn Alisa would like to talk to Ajahn Neil.
Okay.
I'm just wanna give you a big hand.
Oh, okay. I agree. Everyone enjoys the session.
Not bad.
Your thoughts, right? I think it's your personal technique. You write your discussion. Very interesting.
Good.
From the beginning to the end, right? Not just to back up our claim, but we try to say something for limitation. Okay, we have something good from คุณเบญจวรรณนะคะอาจารย์ชลิดานะคะ Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If we still have some more question, we can talk to Ajahn Neil next month on 13 December, the last one in the series, which is most important, right, Neil? Very important.
Yes.
About the process of publication. What do we do step by step from Ajahn Neil? So I would say don't miss it, right? Don't miss the session by Ajahn Neil next month. So today, thank you so much, Ajahn Neil, and all the audience, all the fan clubs from Ajahn Neil. The dean is having meeting with a director about some work. So he just pass his regards to everyone, and then he wished to see everyone again maybe next month in the next topic. So right now we put evaluation form in chat, so please help us improve our work by putting that one, and also another one for you for your certificate, right? Digital certificate. So 2 links for everyone, and then if you have done with that, we will meet again next month from Ajahn Neil's last topic, writing for publication or publication process. Okay, thank you so much, Ajahn Neil, and then we will see again very soon.